Thank you and welcome. This is a beautiful opportunity to celebrate our Hispanic Heritage Month together with all of you. We have two other, amazing people that I respect so much in their work they do, and they have given us a window of opportunity to talk about something that they know about that may not be in the books of history. So I'm gonna ask everyone to relax. We, more than anything, we are gonna honor the indigenous people of Latin America, Central America, the Caribbean, and North America. That starts with Mexico, okay? North America is Mexico. So, and let's do it in the fashion of the native people. I learned with the indigenous people that in their world, everything is around the 4 elements of nature. Who can put it in the chat, what those elements of nature are? For everyone to see. Just one. Wind, air, exactly. Oh, goodness. Everyone, all right, okay. So now I'm going to do a relaxation, and I will say even more deeper, a mindful practice based in those 4 elements that they consider sacred as our own life. So let's start with the fire. And let's put our hands in our heart, because fire represents the heart, the emotions. And imagine the range of emotions from hate to love. That's what we human beings do. We have a range of emotions and feelings. So let's kind of drum a little bit. You know, the indigenous people have told me that they drum because they want to have the same beat that Mother Earth at the center, which is lava, tremendous fire. And they said that electronically, our heart has the same electronic waves. So, and now let's create a butterfly. Let's bring together the big fingers. And look, we have a butterfly. So imagine what are the feelings, emotions we want to let go, so this beautiful butterfly can take it. So just look at seeing that noise in the universe. So everything is flying out that we don't need. We need to travel light. So thank you, my friends. We have honored the fire element, our emotions. So now, if you're so kind, put your hand like this, like a clipper. And now do the same motion behind your neck, grabbing the skin of your neck. And close your eyes and smile. You know, we are changing our brain right now. When we smile, endorphins trickle down through all the body. Endorphins produce calm and happiness. And we are holding this vagus nerve, that is the biggest nerve that connects the head with the heart. And also, again, it produces peace, calmness. So if you are so kind, check what it is that you're feeling, the sensations of your body. Make the biggest smile for you that brought yourself to this encounter. So Now that you are there, you are smiling to yourself. Know that when I suggest to open your eyes, you are going to share the smile with everyone in this room. Thank you. It's nice to see people smile. All right. So we have honored our heart, our emotions, our mind, which is the water. And now let's do, Christy, don't worry about not turning, just join us as you are. That's beautiful. So let's incline the head, let's feel the heaviness, and let's go with a small little massage. And I'm going to say the words of Peter Levine that are just so pertaining. This is my neck. This is my shoulders. I love my neck. I love my shoulder. My shoulders and my neck are one. And inhaling, let's change to the other side and let's do the same thing. These are my shoulders. This is my neck. I love my shoulders. I love my neck. My neck and my shoulders and me are one. All right. So I don't know how you're feeling, but I feel more like relaxed. It's important when you're presenting. And now we have honored the fire, we have honored the water, we have honored the earth on us. Now let's honor the element air that represents the spirit because it's invisible. And I invite you to close your eyes and do any gesture with your hands that with whatever you believe is the higher value in your life. Some people call it God, others Allah, others just superior being, whatever spirit. We respect that, whatever that is. And I invite you to bathe yourself with that beautiful presence. And I invite you to bless every person in this meeting, in this event, from that beautiful presence in you. Let's receive it. Let's receive the blessings. Thank you, thank you. So here we are. We have honored the indigenous people's wisdom, philosophy. Everything around it works with the four elements and the four aspects of being that they represent. So we live in their stolen lands. And that's what is important, to connect with their philosophy, their wisdom. And now I'm going to invite to the floor our dear Dr. Carla Guerrero Montero to share with us what she brought for us. It's a beautiful treat in history.
Thank you so much, Charito, and thank you once again for the invitation and to the Milton Public Library for allowing us to have this conversation. I think that we are very fortunate to have two wonderful persons listening to us, and hopefully maybe there will be more once this recording is offered to the public. So what I wanted to share with you during the month of the Latinx populations is the story very, very quickly of a person that you might not be familiar with. I think very few people are familiar with because she comes from a country that is peripheric, and within that country, she was a woman. So that made her already being some sort of secondary citizen for a period of time in our history. I am originally from Ecuador, so I thought I will bring this story with you, to you, and I think you might find it interesting. I'm going to talk to you about Matilde Hidalgo Navarro, who I will say is absolutely a pioneer in women's rights in Latin America, and I will explain to you why that is the case. So Matilde Hidalgo Navarro was born in Loja, that's the province that borders with Peru in Ecuador, on September 26, 1889. From the beginning of her life, she started doing all sorts of pioneering things. The first one was that she was the first woman to graduate from high school in 1913. She went to a primary school that was a Catholic primary school. I should say that she was from the middle classes, so she already had certain advantage in that regard. But at the time, it was expected that women will finish their education in primary school and then they will prepare to be married. But she wanted to study. She always wanted to continue her education, and she actually convinced her parents to apply to study in a secondary school that was all male, and she actually was able to do it. Incredibly enough, she managed to do it, and she studied for her high school at an all-male school. She was the only girl in the entire school, and she suffered tremendously as a result of that. There was quite a bit of bullying that she had to endure in order to continue her studies, but she actually did finish. And this is just information of when she died. She was 85 when she died. So let me continue to share with you the many ways in which she was a pioneer. After she graduated from high school, she said she wanted to be a doctor, so she went to the university, and she became the first woman who became a doctor in Ecuador in 1921. She studied eclampsia, which are the seizures that sometimes women endure during pregnancy, right? So she actually studied how the prevalence of that particular condition in women in a public hospital in Quito, in the capital of Ecuador. So she conducted research there, collected data, and then wrote her thesis and became the first woman doctor in Ecuador. So we already have two examples of the way in which she was a pioneer, but there are more to share with you. She actually was the first woman to register to vote for an election in Ecuador. And this is, I think, the most fascinating part of her story, because she just realized that she could find a loophole in the law, because she really thought that voting needed to be a right that men and women needed to have. So she actually, and I'll tell you more in a few seconds, but she applied to the Electoral Tribunal, and the Electoral Tribunal actually recognized that there was no legal impediment for her to vote, and she actually did vote. Eventually, in 1929, women were eligible to vote in Ecuador, but in effect, she was the first woman in the entire region of Latin America to actually vote. I'm sure that you are impressed. I am incredibly impressed by this woman. So her story of successes continue, because she actually wanted to enter politics, and she was the first congresswoman of Ecuador. Before that, she actually ran for elections at a local level, and she won those elections. She was the founding member of the Medical Federation of Ecuador and the founding member of the Feminine Red Cross. So again, an extraordinary woman. But I did want to make sure that we will put all of this information in context, because yes, she was extraordinary, but there were things happening at the time that allowed for her to go through all of these successes one after the other. And I do want to focus on the issue of elections, because it is the most impressive one. And we do need to recognize that there was already a discussion about what does it mean to be a citizen in Ecuador since the late 19th century. So there were a lot of debate about what does it mean to be a citizen. Can women vote? Do they have the right? Do they have the capacity? Or should they be confined to the private sphere? And just this conversation was already sort of a criticism of what it meant to be part of the public and the private sphere. So we need to put her into context. Another aspect of this conversation has to do with the fact that she was in fact part of the emergent middle class from the peripheral provinces in Ecuador. She was born in a province that was peripheral to the center, which was Quito, and also the major port in Ecuador, Guayaquil. So all of these middle classes were sort of trying to find a way to connect with the dominant classes in the major provinces. So that's another element that is important to recognize. Also, the fact that at the moment there were a lot of conversations regarding women's roles and capacities at the global level. So people were talking, both men and women, about women's rights all over the place, and Ecuador was a country that was influenced by that. So here I share a fascinating element of this whole process, because in the 1884 Constitution, this is the definition of a citizen: someone who is a man who knows how to read and who is 21 years old. So that in effect eliminated a number of people, indigenous peoples of African descent, because normally they didn't have access to an education, therefore they could not read. And of course, every woman, even those who were able to read. So a large number of citizens were eliminated from the possibility of voting. And then after a liberal revolution that really transformed the country in so many ways, Ecuador was a country known for being very conservative, but then we had an impressive revolution that really transformed the country in a liberal way, of course, following capitalist interests. The main intention of the liberal revolution was to open up the country to become capitalist, but nonetheless, there were certain advantages that resulted from this revolution. So this revolution transformed the constitution from those men who know how to read to those people. And by eliminating the word men, it opened up the possibilities. So Matilde said, well, I'm a person, therefore I'm allowed to vote. And she was able to, again, use this loophole to vote. And after that, in 1921, the Constitution explicitly eliminates any possible misconception, indicating that those who can vote are those people without consideration for their sex. Of course, the element of who know how to read remained until quite late, until 1979. That's when the section that says who know how to read was eliminated. So it took us a while. And here I just have a list of the different countries that granted women the right to vote. You can see that New Zealand was the first country. The US, this took place in 1920, but then Ecuador is right after the US. And in Latin America, we see that Brazil followed, Argentina and Mexico, Chile, etc. These are just examples. But in effect, Ecuador was the first country that granted women the right to vote. So that's my story, and I hope that you have enjoyed meeting Matilde. I really am a fan of her. Regardless of all of these historical elements, there's no doubt that she was an incredibly strong woman. Thank you so much.
Fascinating how our heroes are not only, those that books have been written about, but there was that strength in others as well. So now we have the privilege. Thank you, Carlita. It was a fascinating story. And now we have the privilege to hear Sonia Robles, Dr. Sonia Robles.
Okay. Everybody can see my screen, correct? Okay, I know we always ask. So thank you again for the invitation. Thank you for, I think this is a great opportunity just to get together, right? Even though we're not actually physically in the same place, I think we can definitely have a conversation. So I wanted to talk about, something that I know a little bit about, right? That I'm still also learning a little bit more about, but it's the Spanish language population, right? But specifically broadcast media in the United States during the 20th century. So the two basic topics, right? There's a lot to say when it comes to broadcast media, but what I'm talking about specifically is radio. So I'm talking about radio, the kind of radio, right? Not that we have like the satellite radio, maybe we're familiar with like in our cars, or maybe on the computer, right? You can tune into a digital radio station. We're talking about the radio, like the one you see here, right on the left-hand side, like something that you still have to turn the dials, to try to connect. And then where specifically, I want to tell you guys a story about the U.S.-Mexico border, and there's several images that I'm going to show, and I don't have a lot of words in the images, but I trying to convey some basic idea, right? And one of the things that I like about this image here on the right-hand side is that while you know that there is a dividing line, right, it's not the prominent feature in the map. And so I think that this goes along with the theme, right, of the story of radio, right, along in this region, right? And so just to kind of give us some context as well, I definitely wanted to say, right, that we I have to remember, right, that Mexican-born population. I'm talking about Mexican when I say Spanish language. First and foremost, I'm talking about Mexican population because of the location. So just to kind of give, I think just like a useful reminder, right? This is a graph, right, that shows, the ascent, right? Certainly, right, of Mexicans in the United States, beginning, in the middle of the 19th century, and going over, obviously, to more recent times, although not the most recent times, right? We know that we had a census last year, right? That also is, indicated, more, updated information. And so the period that I'm talking about here is right when this graph is ascending, right? So, between 1920 and 1930, right? Right when there's this increase, right, of Spanish-speaking, Mexican population here in the United States. And so probably not a big surprise, right? That, most of the people, right, who speak Spanish, right, and the greater percentage of them, are located in the U.S. Southwest. I think this map is changing, right? And, recent census data is showing, that this map, right, while it may be, 10 years old, less than 10 years old, is still useful, right? We know that it's basically still evolving, but in the time period that I'm talking about, right, this was very much, the region, right, that spoke Spanish in the United States. We're talking about the U.S. Southwest, the territory that the United States acquired after the Mexican-American War in 1848, right, when that war finalized. So this is, again, just to kind of, put some more things into context. And so what is the story I'm going to tell? The story that I'm telling is the story of radio stations that set themselves up on the Mexican side, right, of the border, specifically to broadcast to people in the United States. So this is a list here, right, of all of the stations that opened up between 1930 and the late 1940s in these, specific little points, right, that you see on the map. So on the, western side, right, we have, Tijuana, Ensenada, this city of Mexicali that is very small. You have small towns like the town of Naco, right, which had, several thousand people. It is still, quite small. You have, prominent, crossings, such as Ciudad Juarez that were, basically established in the 17th century. And then you have, some what they're called, sort of more like river towns, right? Towns that are right along around the Rio Grande, right? Or the Rio Bravo, like it is called in Mexico. And, way over into the Gulf of Mexico, right into Matamoros. And then there's also a town, or I shouldn't say town, a city, right, that is not on the border, but that was really influential in reaching a Spanish language population in the United States. And that's the city of Tampico, down over right on the map. And so what actually happened? What's the story that I'm trying to get across? These stations, right, the series of these stations that you just saw on this map, they publicized, their services in newspapers in the United States. This is from a Spanish language newspaper from San Antonio, a newspaper called La Prensa, that began early on in the 20th century. It actually began during the Mexican Revolution by a publisher that wanted to, make sure that his population, that basically, his friends and his community, that they had like a good newspaper, right, in San Antonio. And so radio stations from Mexico would publicize, hundreds of miles away, right? And so this is a publicity, for a station. And it's basically saying, if you're Mexican or if you like Mexican music, this is the station that you have to tune into, right? And it's coming all the way, from Monterrey, right? So not even along the border, but even further, inland. And so entrepreneurs and businessmen wanted to reach the Spanish language population because they didn't have their own radio at the time period. This doesn't happen until after the Second World War. The first full-time Spanish language station didn't actually open until 1946. We think of Univision maybe, right, as like, oh, it's always been here, right, or maybe a Spanish language radio station. But the truth is that before that, they would just Spanish language, communities would only have 2 to 3 different hours a day, sometimes early in the morning, right, or on the weekends or on Friday night, a night like tonight where they would play dance music. But there wasn't a full-time Spanish language station until 1946. And so this is happening, right, and these stations are publicizing all the way from Mexico. And they really have a transnational vision. I mean, I know this word transnational is like very much like a 21st century word that we just kind of use, but I really do think that you can see this, right, in the publicity, in the way that they advertise themselves. I mean, this is a station, as I said, earlier, like also, in the city of Tampico, right, not just along the border. And if you can see from these radio waves, right, these rays that are leaving, right, like somebody put in the chat, they don't care about the border, right? And they're literally, they're not only just going north, towards San Antonio to the United States, but also south, right? And so I think, they're covering this entire region. And this vision, right, was very much part, right, of how they ran their businesses. They were exactly at the center. This is probably one of my favorite images that I like to show. I do think there's a lot going on here, right, with this image, but this is the back side, right, of an official, basically like an official letterhead, right, that a station would use. And if you can kind of, pretty much guess, the station was actually located in Ciudad Juárez, right, on the Mexican side, right? There's Ciudad Juárez, and then there's El Paso in the United States. And so this is how they thought of themselves, right, in the middle of this space between these two countries. So they're not on the southern border, and they're not in northern Mexico. They're exactly in the middle, right? This is showing, their vision, right, this transnational vision, but also just, how they saw their businesses, right, and how they saw themselves. They were in the middle, right, of this population, and with radio, right, they were basically saying there are no borders, right, because we're going both to the north and to the south, right, to the east and to the west. The last thing I want to say about these stations, right, the stations that I study, that I write about, that they sort of began, right, a series of different kinds of investigations, is that they advertised for Spanish language businesses in the United States from Mexico. And so here, you can see this is like a picture from an archive, right, in Mexico. And you can see that this is a report, right, of how, of the basically like a quarterly report, right, that a station had to turn in to the Mexican government. And you can see you can't see, right, but that there are business names, but then also where the business is located. And in addition to that, what language the commercial is in. So whether it be Spanish, right, or whether it be in English. And then the last column, you have the amount of money, right, that because of course, quarterly report, they want to know how much money, right, is going in so that they can, pay the taxes, right? So what I found, completely fascinating about this is that they're in Mexico, right? But they're advertising for businesses in the United States. So if you had a small bakery, or if you had a small furniture store, right, in San Antonio or in Los Angeles, or in Tucson, Arizona, and you really wanted to, to advertise your business during this time period between 1930, right, and early 1940s, there was a chance that you would go to Mexico, right, and you would pay a radio station to basically say, to advertise your business, right, to try to get that Spanish language population to go to your, to your business, right, to basically, to visit you, right, and so in this case, it doesn't matter so much that the stations are in Mexico. The Mexican law actually allows them to do that, right? And they just have to, ensure that that they pay their taxes, right? For this to happen. And so what I found, right, is that not only are stations, in Tijuana doing this, but also in Ciudad Juarez, right? All along, as I showed earlier, right, on this map, they're all doing the same thing. They're all advertising for businesses in the United States, which only shows, right, also the growth, right, of the Spanish language population, in that they would actually pay, a radio station in Mexico to do that. And so what eventually happens, right, in the kind of the end point, right, of the story is that the Spanish language community, they eventually ended up doing is that they partnered with stations, right, for certain events, for certain, for basically, like as I put here, right, like a beauty contest, or maybe there was like the annual fair, right, the sort of like the state fair that we have, today, different types of, social events, or cultural events like Mexican Independence Day, which was last week, I think, and so evidence that they actually partnered, with the stations, I found, right, and it's very evident in the newspapers, right, in the Spanish language newspapers. And so here in the middle column, you could see that this was the station in Mexico, right, XEMU, and, they sponsored a beauty contest, right, and it's showing you the women that were in the beauty contest, how many votes that they had received, and here you see, right, that basically the station is saying, hey, we're sponsoring this, right, even though we have contestants from Texas, but also from from Mexico, right? There's the binational aspect going on. And so this happens later, right, as the 1930s go into the 40s, right, closer to the Second World War era, there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of partnership. Spanish language communities in the United States, they understand, right, that they're not being served, by the basically, by their own businesses, and so then they go over to the to the Mexican side. So that's the end of my story. So thank you very much.
How fascinated. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, that you have put us in connection on how really there is no borders for radio. Thank you so much. And more comments at the end. I'm just gonna share quickly my presentation. If somebody can keep the time for me, I just wanna do it for less than 15 minutes. Okay. I'll give you quite a few ideas of how we have contributed and why do I need to talk about this and why we need to talk, because silence is the ultimate weapon of power. One example of this, and we need to just take that silence Because, for example, this is not Latino, but imagine everyone in CNN this year, they were talking about the Tulsa massacre. Nobody knew, even people that were intellectual people, nobody knew about it. Or when I was mentioned to somebody, very intellectual person, it wiped out for since 2006 that I mentioned Tulsa to this person to this year, in which finally they saw it in CNN. So we need to talk. That's what I mentioned this. It's not only the case with African Americans. So who thinks that Abya Yala is? Well, it's the word that indigenous people call what we now call America. Abya Yala, it means land in ripe maturity. So ready for mangoes and orange and beauty and clean water. And that's how they see it. And that reminds me of what I said already before. No, it's not our land. It's not even their land. They don't consider that it's their land. It's the land of God. And it was taken away from indigenous people. And they were the caretakers. We decided that we were going to be. And look how far we have gone in that tremendous ways. Okay, well, I'm sorry with this. We don't have time for a circle. Then let's go to the second. So when you're thinking, what is the first settlement of the United States and how is it that we end up becoming what we are now, everybody thinks and quite a few other settlements, not the one that I have in mind, okay? But there is a settlement that have never stopped being alive. It exists until now. And this is the one that started with somebody coming from this area, the red one, that starts sailing sailing to the coast of what is now United States. So this is very hard to see, but I'm going to point it out to you. From what I told you more or less here in the map, Ponce de Leon, that was the governor of Puerto Rico, in 1513 started to adventure. And really, we don't know how far he really went, because you know how those maps were at that time. It doesn't really show the extent that teach us all the explorers from Spain, how they came to this world. And San Agustin was founded in 1565. And Florida is part of the United States, isn't it? So San Agustin was founded 42 years before Jamestown, Virginia. That was founded in 1607. And 55 years before Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1620. So that is very, very important. It was founded by the Spaniards. And a year later already, there is a document that says the first, and I will say the first Latino, because there was no Spaniard women. It was the first indigenous woman who built this baby and created what we call now Latinos, Hispanics. And also, that document of the foundation of this settlement shows the first presence of enslavement of people who were enslaved from Africa. That document of the foundation shows that there was already there people from Africa. In nothing more than 1565, as just told you before. So that brings me back to what is going on now with a very interesting project, which I think is very interesting and good to do it. But, you know, it made me pause about this. The project 1619 that everybody's talking about the 400 years of slavery. Well, many African American intellectuals are puzzled by it too, because that means that 54 years are left. And we are saying, okay, let's ignore that there was already Africans brought here for 54 years before 1690. It's okay with me. It's like somebody saying that. Because what they are following is only the trace that have been the mark of history in America. Only whatever English people did count as history. Whatever others did, like founding settlement that remains until now, doesn't matter. Why? Because they were Hispanics. But, as I said, the Africans were there. And it's very, very interesting, the fact that we know this, because the people that were enslaved were not really slaves as the institution that of slavery that became in the United States. This was the horrific, worst ever institution of slavery that the world had. And it didn't happen from day one. So the first Africans were indentured servants, but because they came with the Catholics, there was a very interesting peculiarity in their lives. When they have children, because they got married, they keep those children. Those children wouldn't be taken away against their will, because there was a marriage sacrament, and they will respect that. Also, they were able to have their own business so they can feed these children, and those business wouldn't be taken away from them. And that's why several decades later, even more than a century, the word of mouth about St. Augustine was passed through everyone that were enslaved, and they moved. One time there was 100 enslaved people that decided to go, and they were calling the others, and they were so strong going to freedom. The white people that thought they owned these people, starting with horses and guns, and stopped in 10 miles before they got to their destination in San Agustin. They killed 30 of them, and the others, so they will never ever do that again. So that's what is important to know, all perspectives in this Hispanic Heritage Month is allowing us to do that. Okay, so now this is a question that is so easy to figure it out now. What is the first language? Well, of course, the first European language, therefore, was Spanish. That's it. And actually, it should be called Castilian, because Spanish came from the Castilian region. So, I remember that we will call it, it's time to Castellano class. Very good. So now the next one, and I'm checking my time. Yeah, I have a little bit of time. 20 minutes. The other one is the contribution to the American Revolutionary War, which made this country, isn't it? So Spain and its colonies were crucial for U.S. independence. They provide fighting, people and military strategies that actually cut up the English people to win. They provided supplies, and there is a funny story that not funny when you are fighting the war, but when you see it in retrospect, they sent uniforms, but the color was the same one as the enemy, so they couldn't use that color. Remember, it was a physical war, so you needed to know, if you are red, he has to be green, and then you kill each other because you know who is who. And so that was, I don't know what they did with all those uniforms. And of course, they sent money. So the money, I put this map so you can remember all this is the Spanish colonies, huge. and our ancestors are included in that, okay? So the money that came for the Revolutionary War, one of them came from a tax for war and pulque at pulquerias. And pulquerias is pulque is an alcoholic drink from maguey plant, something like a beer. Okay, and also the other way how they got the money is a collection through the Catholic missions, because you know every Sunday there will be a mass and there will be an extra something, an extra coin for the Revolutionary War. So our ancestors paid for the war and the liberation from the kingdom of England. So as far as I know, this is the only plague that exists in the world. In the United States, there must be more now, but I kind of copy this part that it says, it is little understood that Spain underwrote 80% of the war cost. Can you imagine? Okay, so and then they praise Bernardo de Galvez as a hero because his strategy is the one that finally cut the English from having resources. 80% is a good number to remember. The next one is the origin of the dollar. What is the history of the dollar? Oliver Pollock tracked the money that came for the Revolutionary War in accounting books. Somebody had to put it in writing, you know, they were money that they're being received. So he did that. But let me tell you first about the name of dollar. Dollar came from the German thaler that became the English word for Spanish peso, which is, you know, peso is how we call the Spanish call the money at the English colonies. And this was the German thing because there was really a lot of German language being spoken, and Franklin was really, really adamant. He wrote publicly saying, we cannot let them take cover with their language. It has to be ours, because otherwise they will never identify with our culture. So he was also, you know, trying to get rid of that. There was so much German language around, and that's how the thaler became the dollar. Now the symbols, put yourselves in the foot of this accountant that I mentioned, Pollard. So he sees this money, he knows how it is, and there was 2 pillars of Hercules to flank the royal shield. So you see where I am with my arrow, and with a ribbon loosely wrapped around it. So now, if you want to have fun with me, let's do this with your fingers, okay, in front of you. 1, 2, and then something loosening around balloon. So what is that? Is this. That's what he was doing. The Herculeans pillars and the wrap around. That's it. So that's how it became. Therefore, the US dollar was adopted from Spain in November 1776, 4 months later after the Declaration of Independence. Okay, so we have come to the last one. The Mexico territory became the USA. Now, remember I showed you the map of the colonies of Spain. And now I want you to picture this. Yeah, okay. This was what it was, Mexico, right? And this is the part that was not given. It was taken by an unjust word. At the time when this happened in 1820, or already prior to that, there was this Monroe Doctrine that said America is for the Americans. So that means go. You have the mandate of God to go all over the place and take the lands away from those that are not English speakers, that are not white and blonde as us, the higher race. It was, of course, a white supremacist perspective and social construction. And they trick, and they did everything to trick, and they got it. They got it. And the people that were there were treated very badly when the economic upheaval came in several decades before, for 3 times in history. They will put all the Mexicans that look like Mexicans, actually, that were born there, and they will just ship them in trucks to the heart of Mexico. And sometimes they didn't even know anything about Mexico anymore. So that's how 15% of Mexico became 1/3 of the United States. All right, so this is the last thing. Largest, the indigenous people is the contribution, the different people lands that we took away from them. The first land, San Agustin, the first language, the 80% of the funds for the American Revolutionary War, the dollar symbol, and the territories of Mexico. All right, so I think it's very important to talk about all these things. And okay, do you have comments? I would like to hear from Christy, or the other speakers.
So Matilde was new to me. I know a little bit about the Border Blasters stations, just because I read, have you ever read News for All the People from Juan Gonzalez and Joseph Torres? Yeah, I just finished that book a couple weeks ago. So it's funny that you mentioned that. And then I wasn't familiar with all of the details that Charito said. But yeah, it's interesting to hear all of that. I could probably think of a lot more contributions that people continue to make, like in blood and bodies, to uphold America as it is today.
Yeah, but this is just like the skeleton, it's like the bones structure of, right. But we don't even talk about this bone structure. So that's what I think is upon us. So Tulsa won't happen in our watch, in the sense that our pain should not be silenced.
Yeah. And then another thing from that book that I read was about the contributions of Jose Marti and how he really changed the dynamic of media for all people of color in the United States, which was when all those different race riots and massacres were happening, Latino journalists were some of the people who became some kind of opposite force. And he did mention that they were sometimes on the wrong side, on the side of imperialism too. But there's certainly a lot of perspective that people have offered.
You're so young. You are our hope for the new generation that has these visions of understanding of the hidden history, and more than anything, the history of the peoples without a voice. Because San Agustin people have not had a voice. The first Africans that came 54 years before the Project 400 didn't have a voice. And you name it. The 80% of the funding didn't have a voice. And many. If you go, I went to San Antonio, and I saw all these beautiful dances. And I was moved, but so beautiful, my culture. And I said to somebody, I couldn't help it. I said, isn't this beautiful, our Mexican dances? It's not Mexican dances, are Texas dances. And I said, no, that is dance, the music, the dances and the dresses and the way they do, because I learned how to do that. It came from Mexico. No, that is from Texas. Okay, so very interesting, incredibly interesting. And Texas are the ones that give us the books and history, the text of education. So there is a lot to say about, what I witnessed there.
And then another thing that interests me a lot is agriculture, which, ties in a little bit with the indigenous lands that you were mentioning, but there have been so many agricultural techniques that the English didn't know how to do and the Spanish didn't know how to do and just moved their way from the south of Latin America all the way up north and back and multiple times. And I don't know, with all the climate catastrophe that we're facing, it seems wise to like think back on some of those agricultural techniques that were here before and I don't know, circle back to them.
Yeah. If you wish, I can send you the video that we did for this week, a press conference that was recorded with the story of a Guatemalan Maya woman. She says, when I was little, our task was to play and watch the birds. If the birds were flying high, no raining season yet. If the birds were flying close to the ground, the rain was coming, and we were the ones telling our parents that the birds are flying low. Everybody has to start planting, because the rains were coming. And that was the job of the children while they play outside. What a beautiful way. And, yes, so there is a lot of other things to say about this. And that will save our lives. And also she was saying, and it's not for one person to start to plant something when they want, because the birds will come and eat that. We all need to plant. So then the birds will get from all of us. So the birds have it, we have it too. What a wisdom, yes. So I can send you that if you're interested. Okay. Sonia, Carlita, your last words?
I just wanted to thank everyone for the invitation, and I am glad that we were able to have this conversation, this interaction, and I learned so much from everyone actually, so thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Just thank you for the opportunity. I think it's good to bring different perspectives, right? To history and to the current situation, and also just to kind of have more appreciation, I think, for how we are all connected.
Yeah, through the borders, through the radio, without borders. Beautiful what you said. And Carlita, the story of a woman that nobody knew how much she worked very hard to do what you said. Thank you so much, and thank you to Pam Batten, who organized all this for months and make it happen. Her dedication, her love for our community will never be unnoticed. Thank you to the Milton Public Library for doing this.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Christy, for coming.